US obviously has for the past 40 years experienced a current account deficit. Now today what we want to do is we want to try and show whether this is a bad thing or a good thing for the US economy to experience a current account deficit. And we also want to explain, well, what causes this deficit? Where does it come from? Who creates this current account deficit? And we also want to discuss the effects of this current account deficit. How does it affect the economy? So these are some of the things that we want to discuss today, basically focus on the current account deficit. But before we do that, we really have to show what is the current account deficit and where does the current account deficit come from. In other words, the meaning of the current account, what is it, and where does it come from? Does it fall from the sky or does it come from somewhere? Well, the whole thing obviously is based on production, GDP and GNP. That's where everything comes from. In other words, if you want to understand anything about any economy, your starting point is always GDP or GNP, gross domestic product or gross national product, because that's where everything really ties together in any economy. So by definition, GDP, gross domestic product, which is simply defined as the value of all the final goods and services produced in the economy, GDP is defined as consumption by households plus investment expenditure by businesses plus government purchases at all levels, federal, state, and local, and also net exports, which is exports minus imports. So this is basically how we define gross domestic product, GDP. Production of the total economy is based on consumption, investment, government purchases, and net exports. GNP, on the other hand, is slightly different from GDP, and GNP is simply defined as C plus I plus G plus X minus M, net exports, plus NUT, net unilateral transfers, plus net investment income, NIY. So that's basically the difference between GNP and GDP. So GNP includes these two items that GDP does not. So usually, the difference between GNP and GDP depends on what happens to these two values, net unilateral transfers and net investment income. If these happen to be positive, net unilateral transfers and net investment income, then GNP will be greater than GDP. However, if NUT and IY happens to be negative, in other words, the government happens to show a deficit in both of these, then GNP will be less than GDP. So that's basically the difference between gross domestic product and gross national product. It has to do with the two items on the current account, which are net unilateral transfers and net investment income. Now, to summarize this, instead of showing these as three separate accounts, if you will, we can say that GNP is simply equal to C plus I plus G plus CA, current account. Now the current account is simply net exports, net unilateral transfers, and net investment income, right? This is how we define the current account, if you remember. So that's basically what GMP is. It's consumption plus investment plus government purchases plus the current account. Now, having said that, now we can also define GMP in two ways. We can define GMP in terms of the sources of GMP, and we can also define GMP in terms of the uses of GMP. So this really represents the sources of GMP. In other words, GMP does not fall from the sky, as I said before. So what are the sources of GMP? What produces GMP? It's our consumption expenditure, business investment, government purchases, and the current account. All the expenditure that takes place in the current account, which is net exports, net unilateral transfers, net investment income. All of these put together will generate your GMP, will generate aggregate production, will generate aggregate income. So these are the sources. Okay, now what are the uses of GMP? We said that GMP has sources, but it also has uses. In other words, what are we going to be using this GMP that we produced for? We're just going to look at it, produce it, and look at it, or what are we going to do with it? Well, obviously we're going to use it. But for what purpose? Okay, these are the purposes in which GMP is used for. GMP is used for consumption purposes, for saving purposes, and to pay our taxes. That's what we use GMP for, uses. These are the uses of GMP. Consumption, saving, and taxes. Now obviously for the economy to be in balance, the uses must be exactly equal to the sources, right? So we're going to put uses equal to sources for the economy to be in equilibrium, for the economy to be in complete balance. Therefore, I can say that C plus S plus T must equal C plus I plus G plus CA. Uses equal sources. Now, by using some simple mathematical manipulations here, I can cancel the C's. The C's cancel out. So what am I left with? S plus T equals I plus G plus CA. Now I can bring this G to the other side, so I have S plus T minus G. G becomes negative when I take it to the other side, which is equal to I plus CA. Now this term right here, on the left-hand side, S plus T minus G refers to aggregate saving. In other words, this is the total saving that the economy does. It is saving by the private sector, S, which is households, you and I, we do save money, and business firms, banks, they also save money. So this is S, this is what S refers to, private savings. Savings by households, saving by firms, saving by banks. That's the private sector savings. Plus T minus G. T minus G is government saving or public saving. T is taxes, revenues by the government. G is expenditure by the government. So T minus G is basically the federal budget. That's what T minus G is. That refers to the federal budget. Now this can be greater than 0, can be equal to 0, or it can be less than 0. Now if T minus G is greater than 0, then we say that the federal budget is in surplus. If T is equal to G, then we say that the federal budget is balanced. If T is less than G, then we say the federal budget is in deficit. So T minus G is basically the federal budget, right? Now, if T is greater than G, then that tells me the government is saving money or dissaving. What is the government doing if T is greater than G? The government is saving money, right? Because tax revenues are greater than